We'll get started in just a minute. Welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda, they are available on the tables to the right of the audience. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. As president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum, preferably taken outside the room, and that all cell phones are set to vibrate. Any phone calls shall be taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to the staff or to the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. During the conduct of the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present their case to the Commission. Remonstrators will have 10 minutes to present objections to the petition with a 5-minute limitation for each person. Persons in support of the petition, other than the petitioner, will have 10 minutes to present support for the petition with a 5-minute limit on each person. Finally, the petitioner will close the public hearing portion of the presentation with a 5-minute rebuttal period. Once the public hearing portion is closed, no additional testimony will be heard unless it is solicited by members of the Commission during the question and answer phase of the Commission's deliberations. Subdivision plat and development plan petitions are ministerial requests, meaning that if the proposals meet the requirements set forth in the town's development ordinances, the Plan Commission must approve the request. In the interest of transparency, state law requires that the Plan Commission hold a public hearing, even if the development proposal must be approved. Responses to public comments and questions may be given once the public hearing portion is closed. We do understand that there may be several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we would request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Again, welcome to our meeting. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, call to order.
Catherine Ransberg,
Here.
Paul Guckenberger,
Here.
Bill Reed,
Here.
Jennifer Spencer, Greg Zusen,
Here.
Mason Pike,
Here.
Dave Kaufman.
We have a quorum. We'll now move on to the approval of meeting minutes from January 22nd. Has everybody had an opportunity to take a look at the meeting minutes? Are there any suggested edits or corrections that need to be made?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We now move on to the public comment section of tonight's meeting. This is an opportunity for anybody present to speak to items that are not on tonight's agenda. If it's on tonight's agenda, then wait until we get to that point. But if you'd like to speak to something that's not on tonight's agenda, now is the opportunity to do so. Is there anybody here who would like to speak to something not already on the agenda? Going once, going twice. I now close the public comment portion of the meeting. Do we have any requests for continuances or agenda modifications?
Yes, we have one request for continuance. Let me pull that up. That is DPR 2313 C-Store and Gas Station, so at 1137 North Avon Avenue. This one has been on our agenda. This is the 5th month now that it's been continued. Last I heard from the petitioner, they requested to March. They're working on getting a traffic study that's required of them. Haven't heard much else. March is their final opportunity to get disposition on this case. So just be aware of that. And
And they've been made aware that
Yes.
they have a deadline?
yes.
Any other agenda items that need to be
No.
continued? Okay. So they're asking for a continuance of this item?
Correct.
Okay. Any discussion or objections to a continuance being made for this agenda item? Do you have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we continue DPR 23-13 to our March 25th meeting.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion, okay, the meeting is, or the agenda item for DPR 2313 is now moved to the March 25th, 2024 Plan Commission meeting. Move on to old business involving MAP 2314 Harbor Estates.
So this is a request for major subdivision primary plat approval to subdivide a property into 29 single-family lots. They are utilizing the enhanced lot standards in this case. There were 2 rezone cases on this property. The first one, ZA 2203, sought to rezone it to R5. That was denied by the council. They had applied for another to rezone it to R4, 2211. But they ultimately withdrew that case. So we're here today, and they are subdividing the property as it is currently zoned. So this is a ministerial case here. It's located at approximately 611 North County Road, 800 East Dan Jones Road, 16.39 acres. This is the property in question here. As I said, it's a request to approve a major subdivision primary plat to create 29 single-family lots utilizing the enhanced architectural standards to allow for the enhanced lot standards. The utilization of the enhanced lot standards does require compliance with those enhanced architectural standards. So building elevations and floor elevations will be reviewed for compliance with those enhanced architectural standards by staff at the time of permitting for each of those lots. Here is the proposed development in whole here. The project is happening in conjunction with the Dan Jones widening project occurring along this section of the road here. So there's been extensive collaboration between the town's engineers as well as the engineers for this project regarding the stormwater detention facilities here, as well as the access and things of that nature. As part of this subdivision, the church will lose its access onto Dan Jones Road here and will connect to the access road here. So we'll be able to get a closer view of that. So there's that new drive here along Harper Estates Drive. The pond here will be expanded to accommodate the increased runoff. As I said, the subdivision of lands occurring in conjunction with the town's Dan Jones widening project. So access, stormwater, and parkway have been designed together with the town. A lot of the details aren't totally finalized regarding the stormwater detention and things of that nature, but they'll be further reviewed throughout the final plat review process, as is typical for plats. Because of the design of the stormwater detention pond, and the petitioner will be able to touch on this a little more as well, being designed in conjunction with the town and accounting for the town's runoff as well, they are unable to accommodate a 30-foot buffer because, if we go back here, because of the location of this pond here. That reason, they are requesting a waiver of the landscape buffer width, and that was not submitted before your staff reports went out, but they should be on your desk there, the waiver form there and their responses to that. We do recommend approval of the waiver due to the design of the stormwater detention facility along Dan Jones. And other than that, we do find that the request is consistent with the standards of the UDO, except for those for which a waiver has been requested. And for that, we do recommend approval of the plat. However, because there are so many moving parts to this, we have different jurisdictions in terms of the stormwater runoff. We have the Dan Jones Road all happening. There's some extensive conditions as part of this plat. The first three are our standards: one, that they shall comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted, that they receive the necessary review and approval by Crossroad Engineers on behalf of the town, HCSO, and the HC Drainage Board, and that the final plat shall comply with the relevant portions of the UDO and the town code. They also must receive approval from the Hendricks County Drainage Board prior to approval of the final plat. They have received preliminary approval and will move forward with that final approval along with that final plat. We ask that they provide the town a finalized approval from the Austin Lakes HOA, allowing for the modification of the existing wet pond, because if we do take a look at that, it is kind of straddling the two property boundaries. So there is some question as to the whether they're allowed to do that. Additionally, approval is subject to an infrastructure contribution for required improvements that will not be constructed due to the adjacent imminent Dan Jones Road project. The amount of that contribution will be approved by the developer and the town prior to final plan approval. Because of the changing nature of that stormwater detention facility there along the frontage on Dan Jones, and because of the potential waiver, we have not reviewed a full landscape plan that shows each individual planning. So we ask that they provide a landscape plan during their final plat for approval with standards. There's a land swap occurring as part of this, a small land swap, so that needs to be finalized prior to final plat approval, and we can take a look at that one. Additionally, as I said, because they are using the enhanced lot standards, building elevations and floor elevations shall be reviewed for compliance with the enhanced architectural standards by staff prior to the issuance of any permits for the homes. And then lastly, the release rates associated with the detention pond in the southwest corner of the site shall be subject to the downstream capacity of the storm sewer to which it will outlet. A downstream analysis shall be submitted with future platting development submittals. So a lot of moving parts there, and there are so many conditions there because we want to cover all our bases here. We are at primary plat approval right now. So a lot of this is going to be ironed out as part of that final plat as when we dig further into the engineering details. Regarding the land swap, this square here is the boundaries of the current church lot there. So they are proposing a land swap in this corner here as well as along here. So the petitioner can speak further on that as well. But other than that, if you have any questions, I am available to answer them.
So I do have a couple questions. In our packet, there's mention of an acceleration deceleration lane, and I don't remember seeing that up here.
So I should have touched on that because that was changed. You're right. Condition 6 was changed to an infrastructure contribution for the required improvements because the petitioner doesn't want to construct a turn lane, bypass lane, just to have it demolished as part of the Dan Jones widening. So the proposal is to have an infrastructure contribution so that the town can make those improvements as part of the Dan Jones widening project.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then, so because of several moving parts,
Mhm.
are we seeing this too early? Do we need to get more details before?
Now, this is preliminary plat approval, so we're really looking at lot sizes, ensuring that they conform to the UDO standards.
Okay.
As we move into the final plat project, we're going to iron out those details regarding the engineering.
Thank you.
So any engineering or any other obstacles to this that would come from the other moving parts would have already been looked at and addressed before bringing it to us, correct?
Yes, preliminarily addressed, yeah. And I don't know if Greg wishes to touch on anything, but we do have our consulting engineer here who's
I will say at this stage is Ian identified as primary plat stage. So there's a fine line between how much effort you put forward to ensure it's like nailed down versus meeting what's required for primary plat approval. At this point, they basically met what is necessary at primary plat approval. I will say, and there are provisions within the UDO that if there is substantial changes from that primary plat because of them not maybe doing as much due diligence as they should have, they'll be back here for primary plat approval again. But at this point, the roadmap that they've laid out, from my perspective, and what I'm under my purview, has met what's required for primary plat approval.
So assuming this goes forward, we're not going to have to worry about one of the other interested parties stepping in and going, oh, this can't happen because of X, Y, and Z. We're kind of, other than major changes, we're not going to see that.
I
Or no.
cannot speak to the other interested parties. I can only speak to what I look at, which is specifically drainage, and then I help Steve out somewhat with the transportation aspect. So
Okay.
I'm not sure I really understand your question. I don't want to speculate on what may or may not happen by other interested parties.
Okay.
should there be any occurrence that would stop the plat from moving forward, then they would not have the ability, if they do not receive their final plat approval, then they do not have the ability to record the plat and start developing it without that. So I hope that answers your question.
Ian, in here, there's a couple places where it says 16.39 acres, 20 acres. Are we rezoning? Can you go back to that one map? Are we just rezoning the 29 lots, or are we also rezoning the church property?
We're just subdividing the property.
Okay, so we're not doing anything with the church property
Correct.
itself.
They're going to do the land swap on their own, and we're subdividing that property.
And the land swap is to give them then a driveway to get to their church. Is that correct?
Some there, as well as a sliver in the corner. Let's see. Corner here, and I wish I had. Here we go. So we have the barn here that's on this property. So they're going to give some land for the barn here back to the church. And the church is going to swap some of the land in the corner here to allow for these lots here. But I'm sure the petitioner can speak on that even further.
But the
So-
zoning's already been addressed.
So is there any negative impact to the widening of Dan Jones Road?
Not that I'm aware of.
Then that detention pond, is that a dry detention pond or is it a wet?
As I understand it, I actually don't have that answer.
I would let the petitioner explain in detail their
Okay,
plan.
I'm fine. We'll wait.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, if the petitioner would like to come forward.
Good evening, Steve Brehob with Banning Engineering for the record. We're glad to finally be here. We intended this to come in, I think, October, and then all of the moving parts that Ian talks about were really related to the town's Dan Jones widening project. Originally, the town had proposed building their own detention basin on this site. And the more that we looked at that, it just really didn't make a lot of sense for the town to acquire property from this site and build a detention basin, and then for this project to build a detention basin right next to it. It didn't make a lot of sense for this project to build XL-decel lanes and paths and sidewalks, and then the town come through and tear all those things out to do the Dan Jones widening project. So at that point, we decided, hey, let's put this on pause and let's sit down with the town's consultant and let's figure out what makes the most sense for everybody. So from, I'm going to say, the end of October up until maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, was working all of those details out. How can we accommodate the town's stormwater needs on this site? How can we work together to make sure that we're not duplicating effort or wasting money? And the result of that is really the draft MOU that we've put together and which we'll continue to work on. But the actual subdivision portion of the project, the 29 lots on 16.39 acres, the way that's laid out, nothing's changed. We were ready to bring that to you in October. So I don't foresee any changes happening with that. What I foresee is that we continue to hammer out these details on the MOU, and the details, I think, are at this point coming down to financial. It's how much is D.R. Horton, the petitioner, going to contribute? How much is the town going to contribute? And after we run through all of that gymnastics effort, it's going to come down to some dollar amount that either the mutual beneficial improvements are a wash for everybody, or D.R. Horton writes the town a check. So that's the things that we need to figure out yet. As Ian had said, this is not a rezone. The site is zoned R1, so we're developing 10,000 square foot, 80-foot wide lots comparable to the lots in Austin Lakes around it on this site. We're using enhanced architectural standards to bring a better product. The waiver that we've requested for this site is so that we can build that detention basin, which is a dry basin, to the size that it needs to be to accommodate the stormwater needs for this site and the stormwater needs for the town. We still have 30 feet or so of width in front available. Since that is a dry detention basin, we could plant and probably will plant that full width, but it would extend down into the basin. So we'll need to pick plant material that could stand brief periods of inundation. But to the letter of the ordinance, we can't provide that 30-foot width outside of the basin. So I think it's a reasonable request, and I think the town feels the same way. To provide a little bit of clarification on the conditions of approval, which we've read and are in agreement with, although you changed the one on us, threw me for a loop there for a minute. So one of the conditions, condition of approval number 5, was that the petitioner shall provide the town finalized approval from the Austin Lakes HOA for modification of the pond. So you can see that pond, which provides detention for the Austin Lakes subdivision, is primarily on this piece of property. It is within easement, and the language for that easement says that this property has rights to that detention basin, and that detention basin will provide for any future development that may occur on this property. So that was language included in the original easement agreement between the church and the developer of the Austin Lakes subdivision. The item regarding land swap, I am remiss in not providing this, but we had a signed agreement for the land swap with the church back in October. And as Ian had kind of enumerated, the reason for the land swap is primarily because the existing storage building located behind the church is on the parcel that was intended for subdivision. Then I was going to suggest a modification regarding previous condition number 9, but I think the way that Ian has rewritten that now, acknowledging the MOU, I think addresses that. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have this evening.
Question I have regarding the wet pond. So are you
Dry,
going to
dry
use
pond. Oh,
the HOA
Yes.
wet pond? Are you going to use that? Are you going to have your runoff going to any of those?
we are going to expand that pond and use that pond for stormwater detention, for some of the stormwater detention needs for this site.
Well, that was my question, because I thought from the past it needed to be expanded.
It's correct.
And isn't there, it needs to be cleaned up. There's scum and everything else. The last time I was back there looking at that.
It needs addressed.
Okay. And that's part of this HOA agreement?
The HOA agreement outlines that pond will provide detention for this site. The pond, that HOA agreement doesn't say we're going to clean all of these up, but we need to do that to meet the stormwater ordinance requirements. So we can't just run water back there to the pond the way it is today. We've got to make not only the necessary improvements for volume, but also the safety ledge improvements and so on that we can get to from, our side of the pond. One other item, the roadway in the corner that cuts the corner, I'm drawing a blank on that. We need to install some bollards around the edge of the roadway there because the existing detention basin's proximity to the road. And that's another thing that required by ordinance that we'll be responsible for.
So when is the church then going to close their existing entrance?
I would say the church would close the existing entrance when the new entrance into the subdivision is completed and available for access.
And that new entrance will be across from Beechwood Farms?
Yes.
What is the anticipated time for completion? I understand that this is going to be done all in one phase.
Yes. We would like to start construction on the infrastructure of the project late this summer. So that would probably have infrastructure and paving completed now, and this is off the top of my head, but that would have infrastructure and paving completed maybe by next spring, and then home construction starting next summer.
Okay. Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, if you'd like to have a seat.
Thank you.
We will now take commentary from remonstrators. A reminder, you do have 10 minutes total, so please be respectful. I know that our rules say that it's 5 minutes per person, but that only allows for 2 people to speak. I would ask you all to be considerate of your neighbors and who are here, who might also want to speak. And if someone has already spoken to the points that you wanted to raise, then I would allow that to, consider allowing that to speak for itself. Do we have a list of people who wish to speak?
We have no one signed up to speak on this issue.
Okay.
I signed the sheet late. I would like to speak if that's
Oh.
okay.
Go ahead.
Seth By here. I'm actually the pastor of the church that's on this property. So address
Yes,
for me personally?
yes.
Yes, I can provide that. Do you want me to provide it now?
If you could just speak it into the record, please.
Yes, 7159 Pullman Lane, apartment G. I actually live in Brownsburg, Indiana, but I'm the pastor of this church. That's the only reason I'm here. So
Your name, sir? And your name, sir?
Seth By, Reverend Seth By, yes. So wanted to speak to what they shared. We are in support and in favor of this development. We've been working closely with the developer on this. So we are in full support of this. I'm free to answer any questions you might have about our portion of it, but we're in full support of this. I did want to clear one thing up. While the barn is nice, the primary goal of our land swap is actually the new road development that they're going to be giving us access across the front of our field. And then we would be remitting our current access for the Dan Jones widening project. So to answer your question, we would close our current one whenever our new access was fully completed. So that's kind of the general basis of it. But otherwise, I'm just here to say I'm in support of it. I don't need anywhere near 10 minutes. So
Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this agenda item? If not, then I will declare this particular portion closed. Does the petitioner wish to provide any rebuttal to the support for your, for your proposal? If not, we will move on to discussion.
Seeing that this is administrative in nature, it seems, at least in my opinion, clear cut, and I appreciate the information that's been provided.
We do have two actions here. We have the request for the waiver, which makes sense to me considering the geographical location of the dry pond and everything else. And then we also have the request for the approval of the plat.
And I just want to ask the same question again. This waiver will not have an impact on the widening of Dan Jones Road.
No, it will not.
Does the waiver need to be voted on before the motion to?
Yes.
I have one last, what about remonstrators? Any remonstrators from Austin Lakes or from Waterford Lakes?
None that are here today. I did receive several calls from one property owner on the boundaries here, as that was part of Austin Lakes. I believe this person was on the other side of the lake. We informed her that the lake would actually be increasing and that the houses wouldn't be directly up against that property line. That's the last I've heard from that person.
Thank you.
I think this is a good use of the land, of the property. It is in line with everything else that is surrounding it. Single-family homes are in high demand.
I would say too, the thing that I think is nice about the design, it has connectivity between the neighborhoods, and it's good to see that we are connecting the developments.
Mhm. I agree.
So I'd be glad to make a motion on the waiver.
I was just going to ask if anyone would like to do that.
I move that we approve the waiver request of Chapter 6.8D of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow for a reduced buffer width of 15 feet where 30 feet is required, subject to no conditions for DPR 2314 Harper Estates.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
We'll take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Motion carries. And now we move in on to the plat approval.
I move that we approve MAP 23-14 Harper Estates primary plat, a request for approval of a major subdivision primary plat to develop a single-family residential development containing 29 lots on 16.39 acres, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report on file, except that condition 6 shall be amended to read, quote, approval is subject to an infrastructure contribution for required improvements that will not be constructed due to the adjacent imminent Dan Jones Road project. The amount of the contribution will be approved by the developer and the town prior to final plan approval, end quote.
Let's take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pike,
4.
Okay, motion carries. I do want to just take a second to remind the petitioners for the remaining, and I should have brought this up at the 4, we have a minimal quorum here tonight. So it only takes one person who says no to an approval for that petition to fail.
It would take 2.
Or 2, I'm sorry, it would take 2. So if you might want to consider whether or not you wish to ask for continuance so that this could be heard by the full quorum. Just something for you to consider as petitioners. Okay, moving on to next new business, which is Mission Foods.
This is ZA 2306 Mission Foods. It's request for approval of a zoning amendment to rezone 13.208 acres from R2 to I3. There's no significant land use history associated with the subject properties. They are improved with single-family residents, and there's some agricultural activities that happen on the property. So this is them. This is on County Road 100 South. Just to the east here is Ronald Reagan. So this is just west of Ronald Reagan here. It's a request for approval of a zoning amendment to rezone 13.8 acres from R1 to I3 to provide for the development of industrial uses, presumably related to the existing tortilla manufacturing facility immediately to the west. The 2017 future land use cluster map does not have an overt recommendation for this property. So as we've been through before, when this happens, we typically assume that the underlying zoning represents long-term land use recommendation, or we extend a nearby land use recommendation. In this case, there are 2 nearby land use recommendations for light industrial immediately to the south and immediately to the northwest of these properties. And we can see those here. We have light industrial to the northwest and light industrial recommendation to the south. This here is our subject property. To the east, we have Ashford Estates subdivision abutting directly to the east. This is a single-family subdivision. As well as to the north, we have the Sunchase Woods, which is also a single-family residential subdivision. However, to the west, we have a 500,000 square foot Mission Foods warehouse and distribution facility in the Plainfield jurisdiction. And to the south, we have a 700,000 square foot spec industrial building as part of the Ronald Reagan Reagan Logistics Industrial Park. While the area is largely industrial, there are several single-family residential uses that directly abut these properties, for which much consideration should be made. By mechanism of the UDO, the prescriptive landscape buffer does call for a 30-foot wide landscape buffer along each of the property boundaries which abut residential subdivisions. So should the Plan Commission deem it necessary, staff recommends that they impose an increased buffer yard width or additional landscape screening by commitment. Typically, this can't be done during the development plan review phase or the platting phase. So should you wish to do this, now is the time. The petitioner has proposed I had a conversation with them, I believe before the weekend, regarding augmented landscape screening along that eastern boundary. And he proposed a 30-foot tall green giant trees planted for every, that should say every 8 feet of yard length, apologies. The UDO, the prescriptive standard of the UDO only requires 8-foot tall evergreen trees every 30 feet. So that is a substantial increase to the ordinance. And I apologize, let me reiterate that. It's 30-foot tall green giants for every 8 feet of yard length. And that should be in my condition. Here's a preconceptual design of what's proposed for this property here. The residences would be on this side here. And again, this is just pre-conceptual. In the submittal of these zoning amendments, in their introduction to the town council, the petitioner has been relatively vague about what is happening here. I believe in the town council meeting, they did mention that they may rezone it and not develop it immediately. So with that said, careful consideration should be made about what is being proposed as part of this rezone, and impose any necessary commitments that you may deem necessary. And from staff perspective, we have in our staff reports recommended prohibiting undesirable uses that are not conducive to being located nearby residential uses. Our fear is, hey, at this point, they are proposing a small warehouse on this property. However, should they walk away from the property after it's rezoned and someone else purchased the property, we don't want to allow certain uses that we weren't expecting as part of this rezone. So we do recommend that you forward a favorable recommendation to the town council, subject to the following commitments. And this is a list of uses that we recommend be prohibited by commitment. That is automobile services light, automobile services heavy, recycling drop-off facilities, composting facilities, mineral extraction, manufacturing, fabricating, and assembly heavy, contractor special trade heavy, contractor yard, heavy vehicle equipment sales, rentals and service, transportation services, rail and air, utility major impact, rail distribution yards, truck freight terminal distribution centers, and wholesale trade or storage general. And then additionally, after having that conversation with the petitioner, we did add a commitment that a landscape buffer screening shall consist of one 30-foot tall green giant planted every 8 linear feet of yard length along the eastern property boundary. With that, I am available for questions.
So why the recommendation? I guess,
Sure.
I mean, initially, like based on what they submitted, but as you shared later, there was reference that they may not go through with this particular design or even this kind of business.
Mhm.
Without that information, why shouldn't we just wait until someone does specifically know what they're doing and then request the rezone?
Sure. We feel that the comprehensive plan directs us that this lot is recommended for light industrial, and that would be the desire of the town. Ideally, there would be a transitional use between that industrial development to the west and the subdivision to the right. However, we don't find that land would be viable for commercial just due to its makeup, its location. So we find it to be the best use of land.
But didn't I hear you say that right now there actually is no recommended land use?
I would ask that you ask the petitioner that question.
I mean, when you were talking about the land use.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no overt recommendation, but I think this is clear to say that these areas this corridor along 100 South is designated for light industrial developments.
But it's right next to a residential.
Correct.
Okay.
Ian, do you have a map that you can show us the existing property of Mission Foods as well as 100 South?
This may be the best that I have available to you right now.
because when they came to the town council, some of the questions we were asking them were they going to do like a inner property connecting road? Because once they got out onto 100 South, could they get into that property or not? Or did they have to come another direction to get into that property? And I guess we told them that at that meeting, and now we're still in the same boat we were 4 weeks ago. And I guess the part that concerns me is it's very vague.
Yeah.
And then the other question, we don't normally have people come in and say, hey, well, instead of an 80-foot arborvitae evergreen, I'll put in a 30-foot one. Why? That seems odd to me too. Why would somebody request that or say that? And I don't ask you for a
They're
response,
increasing the screening of the two properties.
but I think we would probably want to look at the buffer, the 30-foot buffer, and maybe add more than just the 30 feet.
Sure,
But we don't have enough information yet to make that determination.
sure.
And there's not been any, this is just we might build something there?
I think you would best direct these questions to the petitioner.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for staff?
Nope.
Okay. The petitioner can come forward, please.
Tilt that back. Good evening, Plan Commission members. For the record, my name is Tyler Oakes. I'm with Bose, McKinney, and Evans, 111 Monument Circle, Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm here today on behalf of the petitioner, which is Gruma Corporation, but is the parent company and better known as Mission Foods. For those who are unfamiliar, Mission Foods is the #1 tortilla distributor in the United States. They've got about 19 to 20 plants currently with the headquarters in Dallas. And we do come today requesting a rezone from an R1 to an I3. Ian did a pretty good job going over the history, so I won't go too in depth on that aspect. And kind of just jump into some of the concerns it sounds like we have from the members. So first off, I want to address the vagueness of the petition. I want to qualify that. It's not vague in a sense of they know they're going to be doing a small warehouse. It's more of a question for their operations. What are they going to do? Is it going to be more offices? Is it going to be more manufacturing, distributing? It's going to be a combination. And really what this is intent to is to support their main manufacturing plant that is directly to the west of this property. And so that one, I think there's about 500-ish jobs created. They do about 1.8 million pounds of food annually a year at that plant. It's a major production plant, and this is going to be to support that. These lots became available. Our client knew that they wanted to grow and ultimately jumped on and bought these. Skip ahead a little bit. There's another picture just showing there's 2 lots there. They bought both of them. They're rezoning both of them. That's the one directly adjacent to the neighborhood to the east. You can see how close Ronald Reagan Parkway is on that one as well. This is a street view. It was taken in June of 2022 from Google Maps. So construction's a little bit different in the area. You can see in the back right corner, that's the existing space where the Mission's Food is. And then these are the 2 lots currently. Ian kind of showed some of these preconceptual views. Like we said, we're fairly confident that it's going to be something, if not this, very close to this. And really, I want to get to skip the ordinance, but there should be the site plan is what I want to focus on. So a couple things I want to bring to your attention with the site plan. One is, as you can kind of see, this is facing with the north is pointing to the left. There's going to be a right of way for the trucks and to come down. That's designed in purpose so that it's on the western part of the property. Therefore, it's as far away from the homes as possible. Trucks are going to be driving in and out down there. Hopefully, not as much sound, noise, and all of that going on. So the loading and things you can see would kind of be in that middle portion on the west side of the building. Trucks might be stored there. Like I said, they're going to assist in manufacturing, distribution, administrative aspects. So that's a part of it. The other thing I really want to bring to your attention, and I apologize, I don't know if this can zoom in or not, but if you'll notice on the north, I guess the top of the screen would be the eastern border. We do have a 30-foot buffer drawn out, and on the part of the buffer closest to the proposal, there are thuja giant trees. And one issue with the commitment, we said they'd be every 8 foot. I've learned today, after doing some research on these trees, that they can grow in a diameter of 10 to 12 feet wide, which would make it fairly impractical. The goal and the idea is that these trees are packed so close together that you would not be able to see in between them. My client is certainly sensitive to the situation that there is a development right there. They pride themselves whenever they go on being good neighbors. And so they don't want to have just an evergreen tree every 30 feet is required by the ordinance, because if you're a homeowner looking at your backyard, you're going to see the factory, or factory is a bad word, but the warehouse, I guess, for a better descriptor. And they understand that. And so the reason we propose these thuja green giants is what they're referred to. And as you can see, they're pretty big. I think they're pretty big. The whole point of choosing these, why they've done it, they've used them in some of their other plants, but really it's to make sure that you're not seeing through them. And that's, in my client's view, to assist the homeowners and to give them a better view than staring at the warehouse. So
this would be instead of the arborvitae?
these
which are columnar shaped?
These are a type of arborvitae. They're just massive.
Okay.
So they're in the same family. They can, on the top end, they grow to about 50 to 60 feet. We're looking at about 30. And I know there was a question regarding why the height. Well, they're typically grow to about 30 feet. We didn't just arbitrarily choose 30 feet. That's what they grow to. We just wanted something that was substantive enough to give enough of a buffer and screen for the homeowners from the lots. So that's why it was chosen. And I would just like to highlight, as Ian said, that the ordinance calls for an 8-foot tree every 30 feet. And the whole goal here is to do 30-foot trees touching so that they're constant screen. And you can see on this next slide, I mean, when they're all packed in kind of together, you can't really see. On the road issue, interconnecting road issue, I should say, my client's intention is to have connectivity between the two plants. They understand that, especially if you're coming from this new development, you're essentially turning left out of there to go into your other plant, which would cause some traffic issues and would be a pain in the butt for everybody in the area. So the intent is to have an interconnecting road, so it's much easier to go back and forth between the two warehouses, and then and manufacturing plants, and then you don't have to worry about causing traffic, trucks on the 100 County Road 100 South, and all of that. So I guess, again, kind of in summation, this is going to be, while it is, I understand the concerns regarding the vagueness, it is going to be developed into an accessory to this main plant. They would love to be good neighbors, and that's their intention. We're going what I believe to be above and beyond the ordinance requirement for screening. And the last thing I'll touch on is the commitments regarding use. We can understand the town's concern with an unwanted use coming into that area. On almost all of them, we have no issue. There are a couple parts in the ordinance where the description or the definition, I should say, is a little bit vague. So we would want to make sure on, I think, 3 of the suggested commitments, there's carve out specifically for food and for the manufacturing of food. And once that's good, I think my client is comfortable with the rest of the requested commitments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
When do you anticipate solidifying the plans for this site? Because just thinking out loud, If it is in the foreseeable future, I could see why it would make sense to request a continuance until that is solidified. Again, I really do appreciate the commitment to go above and beyond when it comes to the barrier. I think that is a really good sign. But can you speak to how soon you anticipate solidifying? Because that may give us an idea as to next steps.
Yeah, I can't give you a full-blown deadline. Here's when it's going to be. I can tell you that when I've spoke with my client, if they didn't think this was in the near future, I don't think they'd be pushing for this at all, because I think they'd understand we'll just do it when it's closer to. But I know they want to get going, especially because they want to start planting these. They take a little bit to grow, get those going. And with the production and demand for what they're doing, they're expanding like crazy. They've started moving into Europe and different parts of the world. They're really trying to ramp up their manufacturing. So I would imagine, can't commit them to a deadline, but I don't think it's, 5 years down the road, we're going to say, hey, we're doing a rezone. I think it's reasonable, because if this land's just sitting there vacant, that does them no good either.
In the site that's next door that you currently occupy, what is that? Is that just storage, or is that also manufacturing?
It's a manufacturing plant. So it's manufacturing, distribution. I think they do some warehousing there as well, but it is a manufacturing plant. They're making the product there. They are shipping the product from there. All of that stuff. It is one of their major hubs in the Midwest.
Thanks.
So looking at the site plan, and please feel free to correct me if I misheard you. I thought I heard you say that most of the loading and unloading would happen on the west side of that building. But if I'm looking at the site plan, it looks like it's designed to happen on the south side of the building, which means the the residents that are further south would see and hear all of that activity.
We're talking about zoning though, right?
Well, that's true. We're talking about zoning. That's correct.
I'll answer that, but I think what I'm pointing to is on the map, it would be the south side of the building, but it's really the western border. As you can see, where that would kind of be where the loading and unloading goes. And even if it were to happen, I guess, on what would be the south side of the building, the concern is to mitigate as much noise as possible, if any, keep it all towards the western border so that it's going more towards the current manufacturing plant as opposed to the eastern border where the houses are. The entire intent is to make sure that they're doing everything they can to not disturb the peace, the quietness of the adjacent homeowners.
And you don't have any idea when we would expect to see a development plan presented to this body?
I know they're in the process of it. When I spoke with Ian on Friday and spoke with my clients right after. They're in the process of getting kind of final plans together, because I know eventually we'll have to present those and get those locked down. So I could not tell you an exact date. I just know that they need the production space, and so they're working to move forward as fast as they can.
So on the prohibited uses that are recommended by staff, you mentioned there were a few that you had concerns about. Can we get specific, and would you identify the ones that you're concerned about?
Sure.
That are too
So the first one is, and it was mentioned in the staff report, and unless I read wrong on the UDO, I think there's a little bit of difference in definition on it, but is the manufacturing, fabricating, and assembly heavy. I would note that, sorry to get too deep into the weeds here, but based on what the wording says, it's almost identical to the general in the first part of the paragraph, where it states a manufacturing establishment whose operations include storage of materials, processing, fabrication, or assembly of products, and loading and unloading of new materials and finished products. We think that would apply to what my client wants to do here. Now, the second part, and this is where I think there's a little bit of vagueness, maybe disagreement, is it states toxic, hazardous, or explosive materials may be produced or used in large quantities as an integral part of the manufacturing process. That may, to me, is too vague. I think I'm pretty confident my client would not do anything that's toxic, hazardous, explosive, but still.
This is not the time for it to be hearing. You can wait until nope.
So we have no issue. We just, like, I have no issue with that second part. We're going to comply with that second part, but we will fall into that first part. But because it's a may, it gives subjectivity there. So we would just want a specific carve out that say, hey, the manufacturing of your tortillas are fine. Because again, there's nothing toxic, hazardous, explosive. There's not going to be any noise, odor, dust, vibration, visual impact, as well as potential. So as long as we had assurance that we qualified under that general manufacturing, fabricating, and assembly general, I don't think we'd have any issue with that. For the second one is the truck freight terminal distribution center, which states that any premises used by a motor freight company as a carrier of goods that is the origin or destination point of goods being transported for the purpose of storing, transferring, loading, and unloading goods, but excluding loading and unloading of freight accessory to an otherwise permitted use on the site. Correct me if I'm wrong, I feel comfortable that anything related to Mission Foods would fall under that last part. The unloading of freight accessory to an otherwise permitted use on the site would qualify.
Exactly. The unloading would be accessory to that primary use.
We would just want confirmation and a carve out for the food because, like I said, there will be trucks going in and out potentially regarding product that is made there, is manufactured there, and is taken out. And then the last one is just the wholesale trade or storage general. We just feel that's too broad in general. So again, we would just need specific carve out on that front. I'm happy to talk about those if need be.
This may be better reserved, well, I'll just say it. I think it'd be cleaner if we had better idea of what's being specifically planned here, because as you outlined, there's a number of concerns you have, and for us to try to hammer that out in the next 30, 60 minutes is not going to be effective. But again, that's just my thought, and again, leave it there.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I'm thinking, all right, so what kind of language do we need to come up with to allow that exclusion while still keeping, to allow the exception while still keeping the exclusion for everything else that is covered? And I don't know if we're the right ones to try to come up with that language, to your point, in a few minutes to be able to vote on something like this.
Yeah, again, I think, yeah.
The one thing I would say on that is if it's, easier, ultimately this is a recommendation to the town council. If you need to include these commitments on there, that can always be carved out when we file our formal, and that would be presented then. If you'd prefer us to have the commitments in front of you, I certainly understand that as well, and we can always continue. I would probably advise, I'm sure there's some remonstration here, to at least let them speak while we're here and hear them out. And then in my rebuttal, if you all still feel necessary to see the commitments and carve those out before moving forward, we'd be happy and open to a continuance.
Any further questions for the petitioner?
Just clarification. Did you say you own the property, one, and two, the existing facility that you've talked about is in Plainfield, it's not in Avon?
Both of those are correct. Yes, the facility was approved in 2020 and that went through Plainfield. And then the border is literally that eastern edge is the border into what is considered Avon's jurisdiction. Those parcels were purchased sometime in the last 6 months and are now, on Beacon, ownership is listed as Grumman Corporation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
We have any remonstrators who'd like to speak?
We have one, Rhonda Kalk.
Okay. Please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Koch, and my address is 1177 Waterford Drive, Avon. I have a lot of questions, and I live directly on the other side of the trees that might be planted. I also I've lived there for 30 years. So I know there's lots of changes that has happened since I've built my home. One of the many things that happened was looking at my backyard and watching the Walmart warehouse fire, explosions, and having to live through the fallout that came from that, which was very scary and devastating. This means more warehouse facility will be moved even closer to my residence. The tall trees are great. They will take a minute to grow, as I have planted pine trees, 8-foot pine trees in my yard 30 years ago. So I know how long it's taken them to grow, even though it's a different tree. Get it? It's a noise factor also. Unloading and loading in the middle of the night, they can come, which my property, if you saw the map, on the other side of our property is a new warehouse. So we already deal with it on the north side, I believe it is, the tail end of our property. So there are lights, which I know that they need, but they are very tall and they're very noticeable. We deal with that. One of my main concerns also is that Foxford Drive that comes into our addition is a dead end and has been for 30 years, that it will not be open up for through traffic to 100 South. And it worries me that this property is still not stated as to what will eventually be developed on it. Again, the noise buffer is a big issue because, again, it can happen. I assume things would be dropped off and delivered during the day, but it can go through all through the night. And again, I know my neighbors, I know the people that sold the property, and again, the Walmart explosion incident that happened, it was very, very devastating to all my neighbors. So these are, it's a major concern of mine, let alone being able to turn left out of my addition now that we have the 2 lanes on both sides. I know what the speed limit is, but I've already seen and witnessed many semi-trailers that they're not going the speed limit through there. It's like 50. You look left, right, and then left, and then turn. It's just, again, concerning. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this agenda item? Sir, if you can step forward. State your name and address, please.
Tim Forrest, live at 1096 Foxford Drive, Avon. Can you go back to that plot plan? No, this one here. Okay, up there, when you're talking about a 34-foot buffer, my house backs up to this property. And I mean, 34 feet is nothing. And the thing is that Mission Foods owns that building next to it. Why don't they just push it over and combine them? I mean, I don't understand. And then the road back behind the back of the building, that's going to be facing my house. And the noise is going to be unbelievable. I mean, this afternoon I was outside and I could hear them tow motors going in them trailers from the next building over. So what's that going to do to this building? And I mean, that road that goes back behind it, why can't they move stuff to the west and combine them 2 buildings? They own that building. Instead of making 2 buildings and then the access from from their building to the, whatever they're going to project in, why can't they move it all closer together and they use that drive and then leave more space? Because this plot plan does not tell me how far that's going to be from my fence line. I can't tell. You know, it doesn't give me any measurements or nothing to say, you know, whether the building is going to be, there's only 13 acres there. It can't be that big of a building. And I mean, you know, you have one tornado, it'll destroy our subdivision. Then one of them warehouses like happened down there in Greenwood that disintegrated. If there had been houses around there, there would be nobody living. When you got them big slabs of concrete and stuff, and when that Walmart fire, you couldn't open your windows up for almost 3 weeks. The smell was unbelievable. And OSHA come out there with their gauges and stuff and said that they was on the verge of it being red and not green. So, you know, I mean, I don't understand why they can't just move that whole building to the west. And if they wanted a building that bad, why didn't they buy the Walmart building next to it that burnt down that they've rebuilt? I mean, I don't understand why they had to have this property and put this property so close to our subdivision. It's just unbelievable. And then this plot plan doesn't tell me how close this is going to be to my property line. Can they tell me that? I mean, does anybody have the answer? I mean, that's what I'm asking. I want to know how close this is going to be to my property line. Plus the 34-foot buffer. I mean, that buffer ought to be at least 50 yards away. I mean, this is an existing subdivision. We've been here 25 years. And I mean, I don't know. I'm upset about the whole deal, you know, and I mean, that being, you know, I used to be able to look out and you can see Moore Street. And when this comes in, I'm not going to be able to see nothing. It's all going to be blocked. And the 8 people that live on the fence row that this is coming to, I mean, what's going to happen to all them trees back there? Are they all going to be tore down? And then this retention pond, how big is that retention pond? Is it going to stretch the length of the property? I mean, nothing here says what it's going to be. And I mean, I just don't want it that close to my property, you know? I mean, I got grandkids that run around back there, you know? Who's to say that they won't take off when they take that fence down? So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this agenda item? We can take one more person. Sir, go ahead and come forward.
Hello.
Go
My
ahead.
name is Alan Willard, and I live at 1230 Foxford Drive. And I live at the dead end of Foxford Drive. And I'm dealing with the warehouse that's just south of me there.
Excuse me, can we keep if you need to have conversations, please take them outside. Thank
So
you.
what
Go
I was
ahead.
saying is the warehouse just south there of my property, I had so much trouble with drainage when they built their mound and their tree line. They never did dig a ditch to take care of the runoff. My property was flooded. My garage was flooded with black mold. I was in contact with the builder, and, you know, they tried to do everything they can, but they were out there personally at my property for probably every month for 6 months trying to calm me down. But my question is, with everybody that lives in Ashford Estates and everything, our property taxes, our property value has plummeted from the warehouses, and now you're going to make it worse with putting up a warehouse that close to our back property. And as I sit in my family room at night, I see Mission Foods trucks going every which way, every night. It's that close to me already where I can see them and I hear them. And we're worried about all the diesel smell. It's just not right what they're trying to do. As my neighbor stated, our neighborhood was a paradise. When I've lived there, 21 years, and it was beautiful. It was our dream house. And now, with everything that's happening, not with just the warehouses, but with 100 being 4 lanes, it's a nightmare. So that's all I have to say. I just hope you would consider our neighborhood when you make your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the petitioner like to step forward for 5 minutes of rebuttal?
Again, for the record, Tyler Oakes on behalf of the petitioner. Just to address a couple things, I apologize to the second gentleman, that's the second person, the first gentleman who spoke. There is an updated site plan. If you're able to pull up what I had on there, I don't know, we can get you a copy of it. But it at least has some of the measurements to show the distance from. In regards to where they're putting the plant, they are placing the plant pretty fairly close to that western edge. Obviously, they want them to work in conjunction. It's an accessory use, and I understand the concerns of the neighbors regarding the warehousing. Our view is that this is what I think based on the cluster map, a perfect use for the area because it's not as intensive as its warehouse that's to the west. And it kind of does bridge that industrial to residential where it is a scaled down version of what it's assisting. So I can understand the concern there, which is why we're putting the trees there. Ultimately, I won't go too in depth on the others. I think it's clear, and what's best going forward is probably to request a continuance going forward. We'll come back in front of the board with a more carved out on the conditions specifically related to the UDO, and have a little bit more concrete site plan for you. So if it's okay with the board, we would request a continuance.
You're requesting a continuance?
Yes.
Have there been any previous continuances?
There have not.
How far out would you like to continue this? To the next meeting or 2 months out?
Let's do a month.
To the March meeting?
Yes, please.
I'd like to ask one question. Is a facility like this, are there hours of operation or is it a 24/7 type operation or 24 hours?
Typically for one like this, I believe there would be hours of operation. And when we come back before you, we can have what those would be.
I think it'd be good for us in the public.
Yeah.
Yep.
Understood.
Do I have a motion? Do I hear a motion to grant the continuance?
I move that we approve the petitioner's continuance to be reconsidered at the March meeting.
Second. Catherine Ransberg,
Or
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed, Greg Zuzen, or Mesa Pike.
Or that meeting is on March. Okay. Okay. Okay, moving on to our next new business item.
ZA 2401, Pulte Canuck Derringer is a request for approval of a zoning map amendment. It's a request for approval of a zoning and map amendment, rezoning 23.1 acres from Hendricks County zoning RB, single family residential, to the town of Avon's R2 mixed residential zoning. There's no significant land use history associated with the subject properties. However, there is an active super voluntary annexation petition on file to incorporate these areas, these properties into the town of Avon. As part of this annexation, the petitioner has requested a rezone of the property. It's located generally at 6590 East County Road 100 South, Avon, Indiana. Those are the parcel numbers in question, 23.1 acres. Here they are. Here's a land use map. As you can see, they're grayed out. That indicates that they are in Washington Township under the jurisdiction of Hendricks County, planning and building at the moment. However, there is an annexation on file, and as part of our interlocal agreement, we are allowed to conduct zoning matters of a property for which there is a active annexation petition. Immediately to the west is the Murphy Park Aquatic Center. However, on all of their sides, we have single-family residential uses. Again, it's a request to rezone 23.1 acres from Hendricks County zoning RB to Town of Avon's R2 to allow for the development of a 39-lot single-family subdivision. And as I understand it, they intend to utilize the enhanced architectural and lot standards, but that's nothing that we have to approve today. This is just a rezone. The request would result in a density of 1.68 units per acre, which is significantly less than the maximum density of 3.0 units per acre allowed by the R2 zoning district and the 4.0 units per acre allowed by the R2 zoning district with enhanced lot standards. The town of Avon's R2 mixed residential zoning district is the closest equivalent zoning district to the Hendricks County RB single family residential zoning district. The main factor for that is they have equivalent lot sizes of 12,500 square feet. However, keep in mind,
Just one thing there, it's not a big number, but your 1.68 is transposed, it should be 1.86.
Is it mine that's transposed or is it theirs that's transposed?
On their design says 1.86.
I think 23.1 divided by 39 is 1.68.
Some of them just.
I do my homework too, Greg.
And we appreciate that very much.
Let's do 39. 1.688. So here's the concept plan. We got one access along County Road 100 south of there. There is some significant, this isn't the greatest depiction, but it is included in your staff report there. There is significant topographical drop here on the west side of the property where it meets Murphy Aquatic Center there. So there's been a lot of common area there, as well as a wet detention pond there. The future land use cluster map does not have an overt recommendation for this property. In that case, the typical procedure is, again, to assume that the underlying zoning represents a long-term land use recommendation or to extend a nearby land use recommendation. In this case, there's no nearby land use recommendations in the vicinity of this property. Therefore, it is assumed that the underlying zoning, which in this case is RB single-family residential, is a recommended land use for this property. So here's a snippet of the future land use cluster map. As you can see, there's really nothing in the general area. We do have specialty housing along 267 and 100 South, but I don't believe that that should extend to this property here. Again, this is consistent with the general nature of the surrounding property. There is single-family residential all throughout this area, this block here. So ultimately, we do recommend that the Plan Commission forward a favorable recommendation to the Town Council for ZA 2401 Pulte-Cannock-Derringer, subject to 3 commitments. One, that a 60-foot half right-of-way shall be dedicated along the entirety of the subject property. 2, that the petitioner shall make arrangements for required off-site road improvements by either A, paying an infrastructure contribution in lieu of the road improvements in the amount of the reasonably estimated cost to acquire the right-of-way and construct the improvements, the amount for which would be agreed to by the developer and the town prior to final plan approval, or B, follow the procedures set forth in section 7.21F of the Avon UDO, including the provisions set forth in section 7.21F. If you have questions about 7.21F, I can answer those. Lastly, this is a bit of a redundancy, but the recreation impact fee of $1,227 shall be due at the time of permitting for each lot. We did have a situation where this was called into question, so we'd like to add it as a commitment of this approval so that there is no question moving forward. With that, I am available to answer your questions.
So the petitioner could potentially or arguably right now do as they would like under RB in the county, right? The only reason we're hearing it is because of the rezone or the annexation.
I'm glad that we touched on this. So this, under R2, the equivalent lot size is 12,500. Our ordinance does allow for the enhanced lot standards in exchange for increasing the architectural standards. We do allow smaller lots. So in this case, they are proposing 10,000 square foot lots. So I don't believe that they would be allowed under RB to do 10,000 square foot lots.
Which would be going down or going up?
What's proposed is less than what is allowed in the RB.
Okay,
Under the enhanced lot standards.
gotcha. Thanks. Would you mind repeating that for me?
Sure thing. So RB allows for a minimum lot size of 12,500 square feet. Under the prescriptive lot standards for R2, the minimum lot size is 12,500 square feet. However, the town of Avon's ordinance does have a provision for enhanced lot standards and enhanced architectural standards. And basically what that allows for is in exchange for a higher standard for the architectural design of the building, the town of Avon does allow for a reduced lot size of 10,000 square feet.
Thank you.
Minimum lot size. Correct, yes.
So if they were to keep it RB, they would just simply need to come forward with a development plan. They would not require a rezoning, correct?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
If the petitioner was proposing 12,000 square foot lots, they would just come straight forward with a.
No, because they are annexing into the town.
Oh, that's right. 'cause
They
they're
are
annexing.
requesting
Okay.
a rezone as part of that.
Okay.
To also say they could go to the county at RB and get 12,500 square foot lots.
Yes, they could. I believe the petitioner may have some commentary on that, on why they wish to annex into the town of Avon.
And if they did that, then they would withdraw the annexation.
So the annexation requires a zoning to be created. Is that what we're?
Yes, under the old zoning ordinance, I believe the verbiage allowed us to, during the annexation, rezone it to the closest. However, that was removed as part of our new UDO. Our new UDO does have a section on it. It's kind of silent. So presumably if they were to annex into the town, they would be zoned to the lowest intensity use, which would be ag. And therefore, anything that they would want to have zone, they would have to acquire a rezone.
Okay.
Should we invite the petitioner?
Any further questions for staff? Okay, we invite the petitioner to come forward.
Thank you. My name is Melissa Gerard. I'm the manager of entitlements for Pulte Homes. I have with me tonight Rex Ramage, who's the director of entitlements for Pulte Homes, and also Steve Brehab from Banning Engineering. I would encourage you, I've handed out little blue packets, and I would encourage you to use those. Those are the most up-to-date materials. Plus, I've given you a super big copy of the site, the most current version of the site plan, so that you can read the teeny tiny print. Do I have the clicker thing? Sorry. Great, thanks. So this gives you a little idea of where the property is located. As you can see, it's between Hickory Elementary on the east side and Hickory Mill subdivision on the east, and then Lake Forest Estates on the north, which is in the county, and the water park on the west, and then on the south, some basically strip lot development on 100 South. This shows you our property in terms of the current corporate limits of the town of Avon. As you can see, we're adjacent and basically sandwiched in between two parts of the town. There's a little strip you can see between our property and Hickory Mill, and I wanted to explain we are not buying that, we are not developing that, we are not seeking to annex that, we are not seeking to zone it. So as far as we're concerned with Hickory Mill, that strip of land is just going to remain there. I think I can explain Mr. Zuzan's questions about the math difference between our engineering site plan and Ian's calculations. So we are proposing to zone and annex there's two parcels here. The larger parcel is the Canac parcel. The smaller parcel is the Derringer parcel. The Derringers will retain a small amount of their acreage fronting on 100 South. And so that is not incorporated into the site plan. So the site plan's density has been calculated basically with a lower denominator in terms of acreage than the overall annexation and zoning. But the Derringers have agreed that we can go ahead and annex and zone all of their property as part of this process.
So really that number is 20.96 acres, not 23.1 acres.
23.1 for the annexation and the zoning, but when we bring you a plat, it's going to say 20.96. This is the comprehensive plan, as Ian pointed out. I actually went and did some research today on the county zoning, and this will be important for part of my presentation later on. The property is currently, as Ian correctly noted, RB in the county. It has been zoned either R2 or RE. It's kind of changed, but it's the same zone classification. They've just changed what they called it at the county since at least 1992. And I do have the snippets from the county zone map from 1992 with me if you want to see them, that show that it is zoned RB as of 1992. They didn't look any further back than that because they were having trouble finding the old zone maps, but I figured 1992 was far enough back for us.
So that's 30 years.
Yeah,
More than
long
30.
time.
More than 30 years.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Actually, Brian, the senior planner at the county, thought that it probably even predated that, but he was having trouble finding the older zone maps. So I told him 1992 was probably good enough for my purposes. This is the concept plan, and you have a larger version. You don't need to look at the teeny tiny version. But I will say this has changed a little bit since since we filed and since we had our neighbors meeting, and what we showed the town council on the introduction. We have lost a few lots due to topography. So the original petition was at 42. We're down to 39. We'd like to try and gain them back a little bit in engineering if we can, but right now we're at 39. Also, based on the neighbors meeting, I challenged our engineers to go back and the 4 lots across the northern border. And if you look at the large version of the site plan, I will tell you both along the northern, I can't make this work, both up here and here, there is a 40-foot WCCD sanitary easement. We can't put anything in it. We can't buffer, we can't plant, we can't mound, we can't do anything in it. But I have challenged our engineers to see if we can get to the 12,500 square foot minimum lot area that would be allowed under the existing county zoning ordinance, at least for those top 4 lots on the north. And right now, those are all at 12,500 square feet to match what would be allowed under the existing county zoning. In terms of density and lot, with the architectural enhancements, we're well below the density that the R2 would allow, which is 4.0. The R5 actually, the R1 would actually allow 2.5, and we're at 1.86. Our smallest lot is 8953 square feet, but there's only 1 lot that is that small. The rest are 9, 10, 12, 11,000 square feet mostly. The ones on the north are actually larger. The main reason for the enhancements, I think, well, number one, Pulte builds a nice house, and we'd like to bring something nice to Avon, but I think we can benefit a little bit from a little bit reduction in the size of the lot. These are some of the floor plans that we would propose for this subdivision, and we are currently building these at Brookstone, many of these models. There are 2 series of home styles at Brookstone. These are the larger ones. And I would note that most of the lots along the, if I can get back to the site plan, along the west side are going to have required probably walkout basements. So I'm really excited about the topography in that and the ability to have walkout basements. But because of the sharp grade there, most of those lots will all have walkout basements. Oops. So I did a little bit of analysis after my neighbors meeting. These were some of the people that I've met both at the neighbors meeting, and I've met all 4 of these individuals on site for their properties. As you can see, the far left and the far right one are almost a football field away from our property. This individual here, we've reached an agreement, I think, on some screening on his property. These 2, I've talked to both of these. The problem is we can't plant anything on our site because of the WCCD easement. And their property is pretty heavily wooded and vegetative already. I have offered this lot here already the county type 1 buffer from the county UDO, which is basically a buffer that they would require for an RB to RC zoning, which we're going to be basically the equivalent of the RB still, so it wouldn't technically be required.
Which lot is that?
Is it this? No, this one. The Barry Tamans.
Okay.
And then I've talked to Mrs. Battistini too, and we've talked about some trees on her lot, but I think she prefers to take a wait and see approach and see how the house pads are visible from her lot. We had initially had some concerns about, Steve Faribaugh at A&F Engineering didn't think that a left turn lane was necessary because we were only going to have 14 cars at peak. However, I do completely understand the town's desire to make arrangements for that, as, I mean, 100 South is going to have to be improved at some point anyway. And so we are completely in agreement with all of the conditions that staff reviewed tonight. And we'll go ahead and make arrangements or pay for or develop in accordance with section 7.21 of your ordinance, the passing blister and the required XL diesel lanes. I did have a question from one of the neighbors about park and library impact fees or valuations. And so I had this little analysis. I'm not Buzz Kern, but this is kind of my back of the napkin. We're going to pay almost $50,000 in park impact fees for this development. We're also going to contribute on an annual basis about $8,500 in tax revenue more for parks than this property is currently generating, and an additional $9,700 in library revenue than this property is currently generating. So I don't think this is necessary. Ian and I have kind of worked this out on the language. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Questions for the petitioner?
Go back to the county's zoning now of RB and 12,500 square foot homes. How many homes, have you done the calculation? If you went the county route, how many homes you would have to build?
I have not done those calculations. I don't think that we can justify the expense of the sewer and water with those.
Is that why you're asking for annexation?
Right, sewer and water. The sewer is there along the northern property edge. The water, I guess, was brought out on 100 South when the water park was developed as well. So yes, we want all city services, including, well, the water and sewer aren't city, but yes, we want public water and sewer. One thing I would also note too is I did an analysis also. Oops. All of those homes with red arrows on them were purchased after 1992 when the property, at least I can document, was zoned RB. So it's always been an expectation that this property, this is not a farm field that we're converting. It's always been the expectation that this property would develop residentially.
Any more questions for the petitioner? Okay, go ahead and have a seat. Okay.
As I shared with the president before the meeting started, I have another commitment where I'm a volunteer and I'm the only volunteer at, and so I need to step aside. We still have a quorum, correct, Dan, if I step out? All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Administrators, do we have anyone that has
With
signed up?
that said, you may want to reiterate the quorum and the necessary votes.
Yes,
for-
so we now have a minimum quorum, and I would just remind that now we would have to have a unanimous approval of anything that is brought before the petitioner at this point, before the commission at this point. And if there's any question as to that, a motion to continue may be appropriate. So, okay, let's start with the remonstrators. And again, I know there are a lot of people here who would like to speak. We have 10 minutes total. We're going to try and be more generous than that. But if you want to say something that someone else has already heard, then perhaps allowing that previous comment to speak for itself would be most appropriate in terms of time management. So go ahead.
Our first remonstrator is P. Battistini.
Pete Battistini, 6576 Lake Forest Drive, Avon, Indiana. I'm one of the northern side neighbors. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My residence is actually located in Washington Township, within the boundaries, of course, of Avon. I have numerous concerns about this proposed development. However, for the purpose of this evening's rezoning request, I ask the Plan Commission to not approve the zoning change. Again, we're on the northern border. We have about 300 feet along that northern border. My wife and I own property there, and that's directly aligned and adjacent to the north side of the proposed development. A line of sight view from my backyard, the Canic property is at various degrees of a higher grade of terrain. That makes my greatest concern today to be drainage, not only from the final new home product, but also from the earth-moving stages of construction, as well as utility and water line placement. With multiple homes per acre's development as currently planned, the land potentially will lose the protection of a root system when countless trees are removed. No one can guarantee there will not be a 100-year rainfall once development begins, and that could have a considerable impact on my property. A Pulte Homes representative visited our property last week and would likely agree that the terrain of my property, as well as the proposed development property adjacent to mine, is most unique. Unique, in fact, that Pulte has, since just last week, amended one of their residential lots that is adjacent to mine due to its topography. I have had minimal time, just 2 weeks since being notified of this zoning change action, to obtain and prepare an independent and unbiased topography assessment of this area. It is my belief such a report will assist in protecting my property rights. I still do not have that assessment. It is my hope that the Plan Commission agrees that I have a legitimate concern and will not approve today's rezoning request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Next is C. Battistini.
Carol Battistini, 6576 Lake Forest Drive. Yes, Peter's wife. So I live on the north side. I was under the understanding that we had 3 minutes each to speak, so I'm going to try to abbreviate mine so that more can get on. I appreciate your flexibility. I'm opposed to any development of the property because of the negative impact it will bring to my property that is located adjacent to the north side. I have enjoyed living in Lake Forest Estates for 30 years. That enjoyment comes from a heavily wooded back area with no houses in sight, no lights in sight, no car lights or noise, no people noise, 24/7. The enjoyment also comes from watching groups of deer wandering the woods on our property, an occasional fox visit, stargazing, and listening to owls hooting in the woods. A development will impact my enjoyment greatly and will reduce the valuable attribute of my property. We've lived on the property for 30 years, purchased the property because of the property, not because of the house, not because of location, but because of the property itself. The privacy, wildlife, lot size, peace, quiet, nothing but woods behind our property. That is what we have been enjoying and hope to enjoy. The process appears to be putting existing homeowners at a disadvantage from the get-go. We received no support from our elected officials, either from the county, Washington Township, or town of Avon. Individuals, the staff with the town, have been very responsive and courteous. Pulte representatives have met with us, been courteous, answered our questions, and I know they want to be good neighbors. But they're putting houses behind our house. But these entities are clearly pro-rezoning and development. I'm asking more for a delay of the decision. Reiterating what my husband said, we've had actually 11 business days to try to find professionals that can help us understand the impact of that. That's both attorneys and engineers. We've contacted 8 attorneys, and we've had to go outside of the county because most of the attorneys have some connection with Pulte, the county, or the town. So they can't represent us. Others are too busy for the short time frame. Similar situation with engineers. It feels like everyone except my husband and I and our neighbors will benefit from this dense development. I'm happy for them, but sad that there are only negatives for us. One of the things I would respond to Ms. Gerard has been wonderful about coming out to our property and walking it with us to understand. Ours is very much a ravine down and then back up. So when she references, and it's very heavily wooded, which is great, but the property lots 17 and 18 will be at a higher elevation than our property, so they'll be looking down on our backyard. They'll be looking straight into our bedroom window or our bedroom deck. So that's where it's really challenging to create any kind of a buffer for those lots. We pay the unquantifiable price of losing privacy and enjoyment of our properties. The rezoning and development with so many lots, not similar to our adjoining neighborhood, with our neighborhood is, well, we have 1.3 acres for one house and the rest are similar, will negatively impact the selling of our property. Instead of stargazing on our upstairs deck off the back of our home, we will be able to gaze at lights of homes and car lights. Instead of the stillness of night to listen for owls, there will be neighborhood noise. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Next, we have A. Plummer.
Hi, I'm Ann Plummer, 241 North Raceway Road, Indianapolis. I'm the sister of the owner right on the east side of this proposal on 100 South. So she has already a huge problem with water in her backyard that she cannot use her yard. It drains across her backyard through the middle to the west side of her property into the woods that goes right next to this development. So on the plan, they show a walkway, a walk path, and how close will that go to her yard? The entrance into the division would be just down from her driveway. That is a dangerous area because 100 South is hilly and it's very difficult now for anyone to back out of her driveway because you can't see the people coming from the east. The people come from the west, and the people going west can't see you backing out of the driveway until they're right there. So that's going to be a dangerous part. She moved there because, like the other people, it was quiet. There were woods, more privacy. There were deer in the back. All that'll be taken away. Plus, whatever drainage this does into her yard, because they've not been able to tell her that they can fix anything of the problem that she currently has. Plus the noise of all the cars going in and out. And I think there's going to be more than 14 cars. I think that's what was mentioned in the plans. Going in and out, if you have 39 homes and 1 to 2 cars per home, morning and evening and during the day, that's going to be a lot of traffic going by there, plus headlights. And she's going to lose all the woods, so she'll have no barrier. They haven't talked about any kind of a barrier between her yard and that. Let's see, and the 60-foot half right away, I don't know what that means. If that's the, there's at east and west, is that going to, are they going to take any of her property across the front or the side of her yard? Let's see. And does this change of the zoning, does that affect taxes if they're part of Avon versus Hendricks County? I don't know about that, but that is a question too, if that's going to make it worse for her house. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Barry Taman.
Hi, I'm Lisa Berry Taman. I live at 6570 Lake Forest Drive. I had a prepared speech, but I'm going to be messing around with it now based on some new information. My neighbor Carol did a great job of describing our properties and the uniqueness of them. You can see I took that picture yesterday as I was driving back from Specs because I wanted you all to see what our property looks like, what we see. It's beautiful. It's unique. I want to put some numbers with some of Carol's facts. The adjacent properties, the average is 71,000 square feet lots, 71,000. And what we're talking about with this development at most is 12,500 square feet. And from what I've learned today, really that's probably going to be 10,000 square feet. 71,000 square feet and 10,000 square feet. Complete difference in lot sizes. So you can see what the negative impact of this development is going to be for all of these adjacent properties, whether it's 100 South, whether it's Lake Forest Drive, it's all of them. I also want to talk about, if you guys do decide to move forward with an R2, require all those lots to be 12,500 square feet. We had no idea that there was this enhanced lot and that would be 10,000 square feet. So when we looked at the Pulte diagram, it looked like to us that 87% of those properties did not meet the 12,500 square feet. Now we see that it's going to the 10,000 square feet, totally new to us. But 21 of those 39 properties still don't meet 10,000 square feet. If you look at them, it's the last page of our packet. Most of them are 9,000 square feet. So they don't even meet that minimum standard. I want to talk to you a little bit about Avon's goals because I did a lot of reading on this. And Avon has housing diversity. And it clearly states to ensure that there's no glut of a particular type of property or homes to the detriment of others, and to make sure housing fads don't become a predominant type of development. Well, I provided a map of the zoning, and there's already a glut. Most of the single-family lots in Avon are R2. This fad of subdivisions with big homes and small lots, it's going to end at some point. And where's Avon going to be left when that happens? Just in conclusion, I'm obviously against the rezoning of this to R2 because of the things that Carol stated about the greatness and uniqueness of our properties. It goes against what you all are talking about when you're talking about housing diversity. You need to have more R1s. You need to have more lots with more space. And lastly, if you decide to rezone, please have these houses be 12,500 square feet. Again, our adjacent houses have an average lot size of 71,000 square feet. So you're putting these tiny little lots in this area with to have these great big homes with lots. I want to be respectful and let other people talk, so thank you for your time.
Okay. We'll take one more.
Carrie Lilly.
He's my father. He's Bart Sprague right underneath.
Good evening. My name is Bart Sprague, and we own the property just to the west on 100 South. We've had it for 8 years. We've had nothing but trouble with water. I've tried to get a septic system put in. I fight with a county. I fight with an engineer. Well, the engineer's been great. We own to the middle of the street on 100 South. Tried to get a perimeter drain put in, trying to get people on all four sides of me to allow me to put the drain across their property or under their property to the drain in the middle of that property, to no avail. I was turned down, shot down, I don't know how many times. To do that, I was asked by the county to put a low pressure line in. What I need for that house is septic. It has a septic, but I need sewer. We're in the 21st century. Can we get a low pressure line put in there so everybody along 100 could hook a low pressure pump in and get down over the hill? That's something I just don't understand. Like I said, I've been dealing with the county. The only way I would agree with it, if Pulte would give me some way to hook my daughter and son-in-law's house to a sewer drain. I've got an 8-year-old daughter that lives in that house and has had granddaughter and has had sewer backed up in the bathtub. You have to get the septic pumped out. Then the ground's too wet, so she can't do her dishes. She can't wash the clothes. The granddaughter can't get a bath. I mean, come on. If you're going to approve it, I want Pulte to give us access to sewer. We have water. We have city water. Like I said, the county wanted me to put it in. I had to run it. They wanted me to pay for the line, which was $63,000. Then they wanted me to pay to hook up to the line. After 2 years, the contract stated that if houses along that road hadn't put it in, they would give me my money back up to 2 years. After that, it belonged to the county. I mean, come on. Let's, if you're going to do something, you're going to allow them to put that home in there. If you're going to annex it and put city sewer, city water's right along 100. At least give the people along that street the availability that want to hook up to something like that. It's just ridiculous. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Would the remonstrator like to, or petitioner like to come forward for 5 minutes of rebuttal?
I am so glad Mr. Sprague made those comments. I was aware of some of the septic issues along 100 South from our TAC meeting. The WCCD representative at TAC had mentioned they'd been contacted by several homeowners along 100 South that were in dire need of sanitary public wastewater. Right now, as you will recall, can I get my screen back up? WCCD is up here at the top of the Canac property. We're going to have to bring the sewer all the way down from the north to the south and probably run manholes at each property corner, at least on 100 South, for other people to connect to. So we are going to be bringing that sewer a lot closer to those people that are having problems on 100 South. And that's, I think, one of the best benefits for the town of Avon that this subdivision is going to create. The reason why there are large lots in Lake Forest Estates is because it was platted in 1973. There are no drainage facilities. There are no public storm sewers in there. There are no water, wastewater. They're all on septic and wells. There are substandard roads. They don't have curbs and gutters and drainage and sidewalks and all the things that we have to do as part of a modern subdivision. All those things cost money. That is why we cannot develop any longer at 70,000 square foot lots. That is the size that you need for a septic system. We are not doing septic systems. We don't think they're environmentally the environmentally friendly thing to do with a modern subdivision. So that is the reason why, lots today are a little bit more cost efficient at somewhat smaller lots than that. But I would note, Lake Forest is different, but Hickory Mills to the east is 1.94 density, 1.94 units per acre, which is less dense than our subdivision will be. Our subdivision will be 1.86, and they are at 1.94, and they do not meet the enhanced architectural standards of your modern UDO. And I would note that that was not something I was trying to hide from anybody, that we were doing that. That legend has said in every single filing and every single distribution that I've had that we're planning on using the enhanced architectural standards available under the Avon UDO. For drainage, all I can say is we're not at a point yet to give you specific concrete answers, but as a general matter, drainage almost always improves with development because we have to capture water on our project and release it at an engineered rate that cannot exceed the current rate of release. And I'm sure your city engineer will tell you that that's something he's going to investigate carefully during the planning process to make sure that we meet your drainage standards. Mrs. Plummer had concerns about the traffic on 100 South. I think that will improve dramatically because she'll be able to use at least either or the accel or the decel lane as part of her driveway and her way to turn out as well. And the passing blisters will be in the area too, so it will be generally wider in the vicinity of her house. And I know she raised concerns about taxes, but nobody in this room is going to have their taxes go up except for the Pulte property, the Canac property, and the Derringer property. None of it's being annexed into the town of Avon right now. Also, I think Mr. Battistini raised concerns about water during construction. As your engineer will also tell you, we have to meet erosion control BMPs that will control what sedimentation can leave the property, and we get in big trouble with IDEM if we don't meet those standards. So I will just say that I'm going to request a continuance. I know that that is something that the neighbors had requested. We have a minor noticing issue that I'd like to cure and correct before I bring it back to you next week. I wanted to get your thoughts and your comments tonight so that we're more fully prepared when we come back in March. We have one landowner that we left one digit off of the house address. The street address is right. We think he received the notice because we have a confirmation from the post office, but just in an excess of caution, I'd like to renotice him. I'd like to leave the public hearing open for next week and then continue it, not next week, sorry, next month in March. And I'd like to come back to you in March. In that time, I'll continue working with the neighbors to the extent I can. I have limitations with that WCCD easement. I'm willing to provide type 1 county buffer vegetative materials for all of the northern neighbors, and they can pick the plants from the county list. There are some evergreen shrubs on there that I think could be amenable there. But that's part of the problem is they're so densely wooded already that they really aren't going to be impacted very much by this subdivision. And aside from the fact that they're a lot lower in elevation. So if you have any further questions of me, I'm happy to address them.
You are requesting a continuance, however, at this time?
Yeah, and please leave the public hearing open so that if Mr. May attends next month, that he can make his comments known at that point.
Any objections to?
I'd first like to correct a statement I made earlier regarding the minimum lot size. I had said 10,000 square feet. I was conflating that with Harper Estates, which we had said earlier. The minimum lot size for R2 enhanced lot standards is 7,200 square feet. So I want to make that clear. That was a mistake on my part. I apologize.
But we will be significantly in excess of that, and we would commit that we won't have any lots smaller than 8,900, I think is our number.
Do we have any objections to petitioner's motion to continue? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll go and make that motion that we continue ZA 24-01 Pulte Canac Derringer rezone to the March 25th, 2024 meeting.
Second.
Let's take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed, 4. Greg Zuzen, 4.
This meeting, this agenda item is continued to next month. I do want to express my appreciation to all of you who have attended here, who have you've been very respectful. You have presented us with very good questions and very good items, and that is something we always love to see, an engaged community. So, okay, let's move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other business?
Yes, there will be a joint meeting with the town council and the plan commission at 5:30 on March 14th. So clear your schedules.
5:30?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
Not for other business.
Okay. Committee reports.
Board of Zoning Appeals met last week. We had one special exception on the agenda to allow for a drive-through at Brewster's. That's the property on Avon Avenue and Galen Drive right there. on the west side of the road. That special exception was approved by the board.
Redevelopment, most recently, in addition to our invoice approvals, had updates for County Road 100 South and Jones widening. Also approved the estimate for sign replacement for the police department. Right away, discussion regards County Road 900 East and Charles Nelson Drive / Angelina Way. Amendment number 2 for the Civic Center at Easton Gray, in addition to a reimbursement resolution for Easton Gray.
Anything from the town council?
No, I was absent.
Okay. If there are no more committee reports, and if there's nothing else that needs to be shared for the good of the order, we are,
Excuse me. Can I add the address of the house for what I was talking about? I don't think I said that.
you said your own address,
I said
correct?
my own address.
That's all we needed? Okay. You done? Okay, meeting adjourned.